6. We're going to, remember we went over the test bracket, so I can email pictures of your test to you later on for it. So watching for that. So we're getting into Europe on page 86. So go ahead and flip over there. Don't forget, I've already reminded them, but to remind you as well, Brecken, you have your math project due on Tuesday, so don't forget. And you have your current event on Wednesday. So make sure you're still saving yourself time so you can work on those as well. Alright, so Europe. So what do you know about Europe already, just thinking about it? If you think of Europe, what do you think of, Gavin?
That's hard.
There's so many things in Europe. So what's just something you think of Europe? So the pictures might help you out a little bit.
The food.
Okay, so what type of food?
Depends on which one you talk about.
Okay, well, which one? We're in Europe, so just pick a country.
Italy.
Alright, so what's the food in Italy?
Pasta.
Pasta! So actually not pizza. A lot of people think the pizza originated in Italy. Technically no. But just make a note of Europe has a lot of different countries, and Gavin was saying, and that's correct, there's a lot of different countries, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different foods. Now, typically in America, we like European countries to go visit and to go be a tourist in because there are a lot of pieces very similar to our culture. And we'll talk about the reasons why. Whenever you think of Europe, what's something else that you think of, Maddie? Okay, why? Yeah, so you're right that there's a lot of oceans and that surround Europe. Or if you think about, in particular, countries like Great Britain is an island nation. Alright, Noah, what do you think of whenever you think of Europe?
Soccer.
You think what? Soccer? Soccer. So yeah, soccer is very important over there for them. Now keep in mind, they call theirs football. Now keep in mind, American football and Australian football and the rest of the world's football is entirely different. So those are three very different sports. So again, we call it soccer in the United States, but they call it football because you're using your feet. So again, lots of different things in Europe. So like this picture is from England or London specifically for it. So again, lots of features you probably recognize. This is from Germany. There is a lot of kind of fairy tale style castles in different parts of Europe because they did have the lords and ladies. Now it's not all fairy tales like Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty, but you do have some castles that are used as kind of like the basis for those fairy tales. Or you could have more of a Mediterranean climate area, where this is Spain, to where it has more of a warmer climate, but again, different cultures depending on where you live. There's a whole bunch of different cultures, and some of them are entirely different from the others. So your book points out Europe is known as the birthplace of Western civilization. This is one reason why, as Americans, we go over to Europe typically as tourists, not all the time. That's because there's less of a culture shock. Their culture is very similar to our culture. Why is their culture very similar to our culture? Maddie? Like on land? Alright, so if you're looking at a globe, I'm going to bring it over so everyone can see it. So if I'm over here in the United States, so going across the Atlantic to Europe is kind of close. I mean, I guess kind of, but what about Africa? It's technically closer if you're thinking about what the idea of what line it crosses. So why are we not considered? There you go. So that's the main reason for it. That a lot of immigrants from Europe came over to the United States, at least in our early years, from Europe specifically. Now today we have a bunch of different people groups from all over the world have come to America. But in our early years, it was mainly the English that were coming over, the French, and the Spanish. Since those three groups are all from Europe, they have kind of a similar culture. That's one reason as to why we associate with Western civilization, because it comes from England, France, and Spain in particular. And particularly in the United States personally, English in particular. So that's how come Europe is known as the birthplace of Western civilization, because that's where a lot of our early explorers came from. Portugal as well, but Portugal today only really has one nation that it kind of founded. We haven't talked about it yet in South America, but does anyone know what's the one nation that Portugal kind of got started with colonies? Brazil. So that's the only one for it. So birthplace of Western civilization. Europe points out that there are two parts to our civilization today. You have Greco-Roman law and the Judeo-Christian ethics. So these are kind of longer terms. Does anyone know what Greco-Roman law, what that is or what it means? Alright, so you can mark it in your book. Greco-Roman law is a vital component of Western society. Basically, is the idea from the Greeks and Romans. That's where the Greco-Roman part comes from. So it's from the ancient Greeks and Romans. It's the idea of having laws of justice for people. It doesn't matter of your skin color or your wealth. You should have equal justice underneath the law, and with different ideas of like trial by jury. So our justice system and our lawmaking kind of ideas come from the Greeks and Romans. Now, Judeo-Christian ethics. All right, what is ethics? Anyone think they know? You might not hear this term thrown around too much. All right, ethics has to do with your belief system. Now, in America, we have our Judeo-Christian ethics typically today. Now, unfortunately, in America, people are getting away from Judeo-Christian beliefs, but a lot of our early founding fathers knew this was a good idea. So, talking about Judeo, what does that mean? What's it referencing? All right, Gavin, you look like you want to know. Look like you know you just don't want to say. The what? I can't hear you.
Jews.
Yeah, so the Jews and then Christian ethics. So again, with the early ideas, like with the 10 Commandments, and with the Jews specifically, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, and then Christian ethics from like the Bible and the New Testament with what it talks about. These two ideas combined together to give us basically our moral code back in the day. So if you're talking about the medieval time period, the Roman Catholic Church enforced these beliefs on everyone by teaching, here's what the Bible says. Now, unfortunately, the Roman Catholic Church had a lot of problems. Some people had to read the Bible for themselves with the Protestant Reformation and then decide, oh, it has some issues, we need to fix it. But our founding fathers, if they weren't Christians themselves, they understood the Judeo-Christian ethics and how it was good for a society in general. Things like don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't go around killing people, don't just kill someone to take their property. So these were good ideas, and it helps stabilize a government and stabilize a country. So that's how come our founding fathers, they brought over the Greco-Roman law system with the idea of having justice under the law, and then these good Christian morals, Judeo-Christian morals combined together. And so that was our kind of foundation for the Western civilization over how we have equal law and we have good moral code. Again, today in America, unfortunately, instead of going off just what the Bible says is what is right and wrong, people are trying to shift and trying to make other ideas of right and wrong. That's probably the reason why we have so many problems in America today, is they're not just using the Bible anymore. They're trying to use man's ideas, and it's not working out well. All right. Anyone have any questions about this before we start talking about the specific parts of Europe? Alright, your book talks about Eurasia again. Now remember, what's Eurasia? We talked about this with Asia. So what is Eurasia? Anyone remember from chapter 2? Yevin? Did you say Egypt and Asia?
I said Europe.
Europe, and I just wanted to make sure. So, just make a note, your physical map is due on Tuesday. So that's what this is talking about. And your book is talking about the landforms again. So, Eurasia is talking about Asia and Europe together. Now again, we have those 5 landforms / bodies of water that divide Europe from Asia. So you should still note them. So, what are the 5 landforms / bodies of water that divide Europe from Asia? Maddie? Good job. Good job. Good job. That's 4. You said Ural Mountains, Ural River, Caspian Sea, Black Sea. What's the last one? Caucasus Mountains. So just make a note that you still know these 5 links. Now keep in mind, in this map, it shifted over. So instead of focusing just on the Europe side of Eurasia, it's basically tilted the map and it shifted over. So don't let it throw you off thinking, where are the mountains over here now? It's because the map is shifting, because we're looking at all of Europe now. So don't get thrown off with the idea of the Caspian Sea and Black Sea, you're in a different spot. It's because basically they've tilted the map to reflect Europe, not Asia anymore. So make a note over that for it as well for it. Alright, so geography and European nations. A lot of these European nations were involved in trade. So flipping over to the next slide. Why were a lot of these countries like Spain, Portugal, France, England, why were these countries in particular so prominent in trade, at least since the Middle Ages forward? Noah. The what? Partly, but what do they have a lot of, or what touches them a lot to make it easier for them to have a lot of? That was a very badly worded sentence. So if you're looking at the Great Britain or United Kingdom today, France, Spain, and Portugal, what is it about these nations in particular that would help them to have a greater advantage with trade and other things like that? They have a lot of waterways. That's the reason why these nations in particular, because they have a lot of water routes, they're able to go trade and go explore so much easier than, say, Hungary, because Hungary's kind of stuck in the center, so it can't trade a lot. That's how come some nations, you see them a lot more prominently talked about, just because they have a lot of waterways, so they can trade and get around so much easier. So, and again, today, a lot of these nations are still really, really important. So again, you might not hear about Portugal as much, but again, back in the ancient days, in the 1800s, it was still really prominent. Going back to the slide. Alright, so just making up, this divides Europe and Asia. Looking down here, what divides Africa from Asia? You have the Mediterranean Sea, and you also have this little bit of waterway down here. Anyone know what the little waterway is? You might not even read it very well in this picture. Alright, Gabby? Yep, just make a note that down here the waterways that separate Europe from Africa. You have Strait of Gibraltar, a little bit narrow way around here, and then you have the Mediterranean Sea. So make a note for those as well. You also have the Arctic Ocean up here. You have the Atlantic Ocean over here. So just make a note for those. Your book points out that location is super prominent in Europe because you'll notice there's a lot of smaller countries. We'll talk about the reasons why for this later on. But in some countries like Switzerland, they don't get invaded a lot. Even though they don't have a lot of waterways, they don't get invaded because it's kind of difficult. Does anyone know what helps protect Switzerland from getting invaded? It might be easier to see it from this slide. So Switzerland is about right here. What does it have that helps protect it? Noah. The mountains. No one wants to invade going up a mountain. It's not very safe and it's a lot of work. So because of that, Switzerland helps protect itself because it's up in the mountains. Now, Switzerland also is today tied with a lot of countries' economy because of banking, and they have a lot of their people, they are used as part of the military to help defend themselves. So because of that, no one wants to invade Switzerland because since so many economies are tied into these Swiss banks, if the economy crashes in Switzerland because they are invaded, it will affect a bunch of other countries. And most countries today go, leave Switzerland alone, that's where the money's at. And so that's why a lot of countries don't invade Switzerland today. Plus it's a pain. But if you're over here in Poland, you're in a plain area. So do you have a lot of natural borders if you're in a plain area? Maddie? No, we're going to talk about it. Poor Poland gets invaded and run over a bunch of times. So poor Poland gets invaded like 3 or 4 times in recent history. It's sad. They just get invaded all the time because they don't have good natural borders. It's just their own borders and they get invaded from multiple directions over and over and over again. So poor Poland. Alright, so anyone have any questions about those ideas before we move on and start talking about specifically what you need to know when we're going to start drilling? Alright, so you're going to, there are 5 peninsulas of Europe. Let's say peninsula, Noah. Good job. On all sides? 3 sides. So looking over this, you'll note that you have the Iberian Peninsula, you have the Italian Peninsula, which is pretty obvious, so it looks like the boot. You have the Balkan Peninsula, my mouse is getting stuck down here. You have the Jutland Peninsula up here, and then you have the Scandinavian Peninsula. It kind of looks like a giant mitten. It's also really cold, so that should help you to remember which one is where. So, Scandinavian Peninsula, Jutland Peninsula, Iberian Peninsula, the Italian Peninsula, and then you have the Balkan Peninsula. So make a note for those peninsulas. If we have time at the end of class, we'll start reviewing these. We just gotta start drilling them and start knowing which one is which. Alright, so several of the seas are pointed out as well, so you might as well just start learning them as well. You have this sea, the Adriatic Sea up here. You have the Ionian Sea down here. You have the Aegean Sea down here. I've heard it pronounced Aegean. You hear it mainly as Aegean though. So Aegean Sea. Then you have Mediterranean Sea, which is at least nice. That one's an easy one down here as well for it. Trying to see does it introduce any others on this page. Okay, so those are the three that it introduces right now. So just make a note. Adriatic, Ionian, the Aegean Sea as well. Oh, and Mediterranean. Alright, so make it up for those. Your book starts talking about the island. So you have Great Britain, the island. Now, what country do we call Great Britain today? So we don't really call it Great Britain, the country. Like there's a name for that country. What do we call it today? Maddie? The what? There's an older name for it. There's a new name for it. Yep, the UK or United Kingdom. So Great Britain refers to the land of it. So kind of how like you have the island of Borneo and there's 3 countries on it. Same idea. It's the island of Great Britain, but it's the UK today. So make a note for this one. So you have Great Britain, you have Ireland. So make a note for this one as an island. And then you also have Iceland. Make a note of Iceland up there. That's Europe's westernmost island. So make a note. Farthest west is Iceland, technically with lines of latitude and longitude. Great Britain is the largest island in Europe area. So make a note for that. Great Britain is the largest one. Alright, let's see. Mountain ranges and plains. So mountain ranges and plains. So you have the Alps. This is their most prominent mountain range. Now you'll notice you have Mount Blanc in the Alps, but that's not the highest mountain in Europe. Anyone remember from chapter 1 what the highest mountain in Europe is? Gavin. Yes, make a note that over here, Mount Elbrus and the Caucasus Mountains, this one is the highest mountain in Europe. But you need to know Mont Blanc as well. So make a note for this one. So Mont Blanc is there, but Mount Elbrus, that is the highest peak in Europe. Alright, so mountain ranges, your book is giving these right off the bat to help you just start learning them. Alright, so your book starts over here in Italy. So these are the Apennines down here. Going down, as your book describes it, Italy like a spine. I think it says that later on. So Apennines, make a note for that one. The Pyrenees is over here. It's like you're saying a type of dog breed, but not quite pronounced the same way. So Pyrenees, make a note for this one. These are over here in Spain. And then you have the Carpathians. Carpathians are over here. Bring them in attention. So just make a note, you have the Alps, Caucasus, Apennines, Pyrenees, Carpathians. So those are the mountain ranges that you need to know for it. You also have the plain area, so Northern European plain. So it's this whole long section. Now, what do we use the plains for in the United States? Noah. What's in our grassland or plain area? What do we use that area for? Oh, okay. Maddie. Oh, okay. Gavin. Alright, so the grasslands, are they typically fertile or non-fertile? Think of it that way. Good shot here. Fertile. So because of that, we use it in the United States to grow a lot of our food or wheat over there in the breadbasket area or in the Great Plains area. Over here in Europe, this is also grassland area. This is still really fertile, really good land. So do you think countries want it or do they not want it? Maddie. They want it. That's one reason why poor Poland gets invaded so much, because people want its grassland area. So taking over this section of Europe is in some cases why you people invaded them, like in World War I and World War II. In particular, the Rhine area, that's another section that is particularly fertile, so they want this section over here. So that's part of the reason why it gets invaded, because they want this fertile grassland area. Because if you have a lot of food, you can feed your army and your people. So that's part of the reason why countries want this section of land. It's really good, really fertile land. Alright. Alright, rivers you gotta know. You got the Rhine River, so I've already referenced it. So it's right here. It's kind of hard to tell, it's a twiggly line. So make a note for this one, the Rhine River. It's also sideways in the map, so that's kind of hard to see for it. You also have the Volga. The Volga's over here. Now, you'll notice the Volga, it makes kind of like a zigzaggy line. So it empties into the Caspian Sea. So Volga River goes down like this into it. Make a note for that one. You also have the Danube. Make a note for that one. The Danube is, oh, I lost my spot. It's hard to read sideways. There it is. So the Danube is over here. So make a note for this one. It also curves sideways into the Black Sea. So you have the Danube. It looks like Danube. They don't pronounce it that way. So I know it looks like Danube. It's Danube. They put a Y sound in it. So just make a note. You have the Rhine. You have the Volga, which is the longest river in Europe, and then you have the Danube. Alright, anyone have any questions about that? Alright, let's read about Europe really quick on page 88 with the vegetation and wildlife. I know it feels like we're introducing a lot of stuff really, really fast, but you gotta start learning them, you gotta start knowing them. We'll time at the end, we'll drill them. Alright, who wants to read first? We'll divide this up into 3 sections. Maddie!
Thus its wildlife and livestock are similar to those found in North America. Birds unique to Europe and Northern Asia include the nightingale, the Eurasian robin, and the eagle owl. Storks, stoner in Europe and northern Africa, high in the European mountains of the Beltway,
Shimmy!
and
Okay.
in the far north, Thuringia are liquid.
Good job. Alright, next section, who wants to read? Gavin.
In frozen tundra regions, mosses, lichens, and low shrubs come alive with colorful blooms during the brief summers. Further south in the taiga,
Good
with
job.
its vast forests of coniferous trees, the fields of the rolling hills of the northern European plain, and finally the sunny Mediterranean regions where citrus fruits, olives, grapes, and cork oak flourish.
Alright, we'll stop there so we know we can have the last section. Alright, Noah.
The wide continental steppes of Eastern Europe support fields of wheat and other grains, and Western Europe, in its mild marine climate, is ideal for growing many of the same fruits and vegetables grown in the United States.
Good job. Alright, anyone have any questions about that? So we can just point out there's a lot of different wildlife in Europe, but it's kind of close enough to this on the same latitude / longitude. Well, it's on the same latitude as we are, typically. Alright, so I don't have a question about that. Alright, so climate-wise, depending on where you're at, you might have a highland climate, like up in the mountains. You might have a Mediterranean climate if you're around the Mediterranean Sea. You might have a humid continental. Now again, what's the major current that warms Western Europe in particular? We talked about this in chapter 1. Anyone remember from chapter 1? It was a while back. What's that current that warms it? Alright, so the Gulf Stream. So because of that, it helps bring a little bit more warmth to it. Typically it has a humid and continental climate similar to that in the northern United States. Alright, population. There is a lot of people over in Europe. Your book points out that even though it's the second smallest continent in area, it's the third largest in population. There's a lot of people that live in Europe. Remember, Asia is the most populated continent, and what country is the most populated? Maddie. Good job, Noah. Now, what's the most populated city? Noah. In Asia. And in the world. Tokyo. So, British point out, but even though Asia has the most, this one still has a lot. There are 45 countries of Europe that range from tiny Vatican City, which is super, super, super small. Vatican City, if you're looking at it, is about right here inside Rome. Now, why is Vatican City considered a whole separate country? Anyone know what's important about Vatican City? Okay, well, I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where there's a lot of Roman Catholic people still, so that's probably the reason why I know this. Vatican City is where the Pope lives and rules, basically, I guess is the best way to put that. Now, no country back in the medieval time period wanted the Pope to be part of one whole country. Why do you think the countries of Europe did not want the Pope to, like, live in Italy, or live in France, or live in Spain? Gavin.
Because they could persecute the other countries.
Yeah, they felt like they would give favoritism to one country. So because of that, they said, okay, fine. We are the Vatican City. Where the Pope lives and rules and kind of like does his thing is not part of any country. It's its own country. Now, it's in Rome, but it's its own little country on the inside of Rome, on the inside of Italy. That's why that one is its own country. So make it up, Vatican City, this is the smallest country in Europe, but you also have Russia. Now remember, Russia extends onto what, 2 continents? No. What'd you say? Europe, I couldn't hear you. So yeah, now keep in mind, we're studying it with Europe. Why are we studying Russia with Europe? Money. They're so close. I mean, Europe was over at 8. Russia was also in Asia, so. Alright, Gavin. Yeah. Yeah, more of the people live on the European side, plus their capitals on the European side. On the Asian side, it's mainly frozen wasteland, which dibs my frozen wasteland, but there's not a whole lot bad that they do with it. So it's one of those, if you're talking about the important parts of Russia, they're over on the European side. That's why we say it with Europe. So again, Russia, large country over in Europe. Your book points out that there are about 60 different languages. Most of them come from Slavic German or the Latin language bases or Latin tongues. They're spoken almost prominent. Now, most people today, a lot of them are either Catholic or Protestant, but unfortunately in Europe, a lot of people are becoming more atheistic or they just don't care about religion in general. So again, they used to be mainly Roman Catholic because of the Roman Catholic Church in ancient, well, medieval Europe. But unfortunately today, a lot of people are just turning away from God in general, which is sad. Alright, anyone have any questions about that idea? Your book really quick talks about the idea of East and West Europe. This is because of right after World War II, we had the Cold War. It was basically us versus the Soviet Union. Now, we never officially had like an actual real head-to-head war. This is mainly a kind of war of espionage or spies and trying to have a war of words, not actual physical conflict. Now, we had conflict in Korea and in Vietnam, but we never fully, it wasn't like us against Russia. So you had Western Europe that was part of NATO or the US allies basically saying we don't want communists in our country, we're worried about them, we want the United States to help defend us. Now since this was right after World War II, we weren't keen on starting a whole other war again. So because of that, we said, okay, if someone wants to be communist, they can be communists, you have a right to choose your government. But it was only after the Soviet Union started trying to plant communist terrorists basically, and started overthrowing other governments, we realized, this isn't working. We're having Russia slowly take over other nations, and this isn't working out well. So that's the reason why you have a lot of the countries in Eastern Europe that they have a lot of cultural tendencies to be to have a lot of the Russian or Soviet Union kind of cultural effects. They also have a lot of leftover communism in their country. So also come in some books, and your book points it out as well, they'll divide it into East and West Germany and East and West countries of Europe. So you have Western Europe, which were the freedom ones. They did not want to get taken over by the Soviet Union, while Eastern Europe got taken over by the Soviet Union. So they have a lot of communist kind of leftover tendencies. Some countries stayed neutral, and they did not want to get involved as much as possible. Alright, anyone have any questions though about that? Because you're going to see that culturally where it affects them. Alright. So again, your book points out we don't hear about these countries as much, not because they're not important, because all countries and all people groups are important in the eyes of God. But since these don't have a lot of good trade routes, we hear more about the UK, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, Greece, more so than Romania, because Romania doesn't have a lot of good water routes. It does have some, but not a lot of good ones. Alright, anyone have any questions about this? Moving on then. Alright, talking about Mediterranean Europe in particular for it. So if you're looking at this map, we are down here in the Mediterranean area surrounding the Mediterranean Sea. Alright, your book points out that there are 7 countries that occupy this area, and 6 of them are on the peninsula. So you have Spain, you have Portugal, You have these are parts of the Iberian Peninsula, so Spain and Portugal. Then you have the Italian Peninsula. You have Italy, and then you have their islands. I skipped their islands. I knew I skipped something. Do make a note of the 3 islands down there as well. I think your book introduces them. Hold on, which page? I know I skipped them somehow. I think it's on page, I think 87. But do make a note of their islands. So you have Corsica, Sicily, and Sardinia. You also have Crete down here. Got cut off slightly. So Crete, it's Crete, not Crete. I occasionally get that. So it's not the island of Crete. No, Crete. So just be careful for it. So Corsica, Sardinia, Sicily, Crete down here. I skipped them somehow. I don't know how I skipped my islands. Alright, so going back to 2 countries. So you have Italy and you have Vatican City, because technically this whole separate country. You also have this country of San Marino. It's about right here. So if you're looking at the political map and you're going through your countries on the political map, get ready, because it's not next week, but it's the following week. That, you want to make sure, I know you're marking countries like Vatican City, that's a country. So make sure you mark that one. San Marino, that's a country. So make sure you're finding all of them. So let's see, and then you also have Greece down here as well, in the Balkan Peninsula. This one also got cut off. You have the country of Malta. Sorry, Malta. We got cut off down here at the bottom. So make a note underneath Italy, you have the country of Malta as well. So those are the 7 countries of the Mediterranean area. So make a note for that. So Portugal, Spain, Italy, Vatican City, San Marino, Greece, and Malta. So make a note for those 7 countries. Mediterranean Sea means Middle Earth, because that's what they thought it was back in ancient times. They thought that this was basically the middle of the earth, that this sea basically was the center, and you have the islands and countries that surround it. Now keep in mind, did they have good ships back in ancient times to get around the world? Gavin. Did they? No, they didn't. They didn't have good enough ships to go across the Atlantic or to go across the Pacific. If they tried, they would have gotten farther out and then would have gotten sunk. They didn't have good seafaring vessels yet in this era. As far as we know, now again, maybe there's some culture that's entirely lost and they never wrote it down, but as far as we know, nobody had good enough ships. So they would go across the Mediterranean Sea, but they couldn't go across the Atlantic or the Pacific on the other side. So Mediterranean Sea was the only way that they would basically use these water rights. So these countries become kind of important because they're using the Mediterranean Sea to get around. It's smaller, so they would use their ships to get around for it. Your book points out, though, that with the Roman era, as the Romans took over a lot of Europe and then the Middle East in particular for it, that they established several ideas to kind of help out with it. One of the major ones was you have the Hellenistic Greek and the Phoenician alphabet. So the Phoenician alphabet, over how we use phonics or our alphabet today, was spread kind of by the Romans in particular, but you have the Phoenicians that they came up with this idea of writing it down and using a written language and using symbols to represent the letters. So your book points out Apostle Paul, he was able to communicate the gospel by speaking Koine Greek in particular as he traveled along the sea routes. Most people could speak Greek because that was kind of considered just the common tongue of the people. Now, in the Roman days, Latin was considered the official, educated language, but most people could speak Greek just because the Romans valued the Greek culture. So they basically borrowed a lot of the Greek culture, / stole a lot of the Greek culture. That's what Roman architecture and Greek architecture looks very similar to each other because the Romans liked it and they copied it. So, just make a note for that. Alright, anyone have any questions about those before we talk about Greece in particular? Alright, wrong direction. Still wrong direction. Alright, so Greece. So, several things about it. So, it's the land of Homer, Aesop, Plato, Alexander the Great. This one was home to one of the earliest European civilizations. So, the modern Hellenic Republic consists of the southern Balkan Peninsula, more than 2,000 islands. It also has the Aegean Sea and the Ionian Sea. Crete, again, is the largest Greek island. It also has the mountain range, the Pindus mountain range. You don't have to note the Pindus mountain range, but But do make a note about Mount Olympus. That is a real mountain in Greece, so make a note for that one. It overlooks the plains of Thessaly. That's the country's largest lowland area. Alright, anyone knows what's supposed to be special about Mount Olympus if you know Greek mythology? Alright. Gavin, you look particularly pleased. Alright, what is it?
Well, I don't probably know Greece and
Okay, well, Noah, you see then.
You wanna?
Gavin, don't you would want to answer the question. Do you want to answer the question?
Well, they're supposed to gods of that.
Yes. Okay. So that's the answer. So if you know Greek mythology and Greek legends, that's where supposedly the Greek gods live. Now, of course, they don't actually live up there because they're not real. They're just myths and legends. But it's supposedly where they live. So Mount Olympus. Make a note that that is the highest point in Greece. So it is a real mountain. So just make a note for that one. Alright, let's read about the cultural insights in the Mediterranean, and then we'll start to review. Because I feel like I'm introduced a lot of terms, and y'all probably start to feel a little overwhelmed. Alright. No, you have a short one, so we'll let you read it.
Mediterranean cuisine offers a mouth-watering menu of foods ranging from Italian pastas to Spanish paella
Okay, yeah, good job.
to Greek
Moussaka.